The rain had been falling on Ashgrove since Tuesday, thin and grey and steady, the sort of rain that soaked the hem before it soaked the shoulders. It smelled of wet slate and coal smoke, and the boxwood along the kitchen path, cut back too hard in the spring and giving up its last dry scent to the wet. The kitchen door of the great house stood open a hand's width for the steam. Inside, a copper pan hissed. Outside, on the flagged step, a girl was scraping mud from a pair of boots she had already scraped twice. Her name was Ivy Wren. She was 25. She was the kind of girl a room forgot the moment she left it, and she preferred it that way. Not rich, not poor as the almshouses were poor. The kind of poor that had one good apron and mended it on Sundays. Her hair was the colour of a wet thatch, and she pinned it back so it would not be seen. Her hands were red at the knuckles and steady at the fingers, and she could quiet a fretting horse in under a minute, and a fretting child in a little more. That was her whole dowry, and she did not mind. She had been at Ashgrove 3 weeks. She had been told, on the first day, 3 things, and she had held them like coins in her palm. The old Duke was dead. The new one was not yet arrived from the north, and there were 2 children upstairs the household did not speak to, and one did not ask why. She had asked why anyway once of the scullery girl. The scullery girl had crossed herself, which was foolish, and had said, "They are not right, miss." Ivy had not asked again. She had watched instead. She had seen the trays go up and come down mostly untouched. She had seen the door on the nursery landing kept shut. She had heard, twice, a small sound behind it that was not weeping and not speech, and had made the housemaid on the stairs quicken her step and look at the ceiling, as if the ceiling had done something wrong. Tonight the house would hear one more thing. She did not know that yet. She scraped the second boot, set it beside the first, wiped her hands on her apron, and went in. If stories like this one mean something to you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, so the next one finds you when it is ready. The kitchen was warm and smelt of onions and the mutton stock that had been going since dawn. Mrs. Halloran, the housekeeper, was at the long table with a list in one hand and a pencil in the other, and she looked up over her spectacles and said, "Wren, take the small tray. Cook has made the milk pudding. Leave it on the landing. Knock once. Do not go in." "Yes, ma'am," Ivy said. Mrs. Halloran watched her a moment longer. She was a woman of 60 with a face like a folded letter, all creases and closed edges, and Ivy had already learned that what she said and what she meant were often 2 different animals kept in the same yard. "Leave it," said Mrs. Halloran, "and come away. That is the rule." "Yes, ma'am," Ivy said again. She took the tray. It was small and neat. A bowl of milk pudding, a second bowl, 2 spoons, a cup of watered milk, a folded napkin. Nothing else which she noted, because a child who would not eat still liked a plum or a piece of bread cut into a shape, and there was neither. She climbed the back stairs. The house grew quieter as she went. On the nursery landing the lamp had been trimmed low, as if what lived behind the door slept badly, and the light might wake it. She set the tray on the little table opposite the door, as she had been told. She lifted her hand to knock. She did not knock. She stood a moment, listening, because she had heard something. It was not weeping. It was a small, patient, repeating sound. A soft thump, and a soft thump, and a soft thump, at a steady count, the way a clock ticks if the clock is a heart. She counted with it without meaning to. 10, 11, 12. It did not stop. She knocked because she had been told to. The sound behind the door did not change. She lifted the tray, because leaving it on the landing seemed suddenly the act of a person who did not care whether it was eaten. She turned the handle with her elbow. The door was not locked. The nursery was clean and cold. A fire had been laid, but not lit. The 2 beds were made with military neatness. On the rug between the beds sat a boy of about 7, cross-legged, rocking, gently and rhythmically, thump, 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 his forehead touching his knees each time and lifting again. His hair was fair and needed cutting. He did not look up. At the window sat a girl of about 7. She was the boy's twin, the fair hair was the same, and the shape of the small hand pressed to the glass. She was watching the rain. Or she was watching a drop of rain slide down one particular pane, because when Ivy took a soft step in, the girl's whole body followed the drop, and only the drop. Ivy set the tray on the low table. She did not speak. She did not go to them. She sat down on the rug, an arm's length from the boy, and folded her hands in her lap, and looked at nothing. She counted with him again. 10, 11, 12, she let her own breath fall into the same count. 13, 14, she did not touch him. She did not speak his name, because she did not know it. She only sat and breathed with the rocking, and after a long while she said, very quietly, not to him, only into the room, "That is a good count. That is a very steady count. I have known a mare with a count like that. She was a good mare." The boy did not stop rocking. But the count did not change, either, when her voice came in, and that, Ivy thought, was something. If she had frightened him, the count would have quickened. It had not. She waited. At the window the girl said, without turning, without any weight in the words at all, 17. Ivy did not know what 17 meant. She thought about it. 17 drops. 17 pains. 17 anything. She said, very softly, 17 is a good number. It is a prime. It cannot be broken into smaller pieces. I like that about it. The girl turned her head, only a fraction, only enough that Ivy could see one grey eye consider her sideways for the space of a breath, and then go back to the glass. But the small hand on the pane lifted once, and set itself down again more gently, as if the glass had earned it. Ivy sat on the rug a long time. She did not know she was being watched from a doorway across the passage, where a tall man in a plain dark coat stood without moving, one hand flat on the frame, listening. She did not know then that he had come down 2 nights before from the north, and had not yet sent word to his own household that he was in the house. She did not know then that he had been standing in that doorway every evening for 6 days, watching trays go up and come down untouched, and had begun to believe that his brother's children would starve in a clean nursery under a competent staff, because no one in the house could bear to sit on the floor. She only knew that the boy's count had slowed, by 1 beat, and then by another, and that the milk pudding was going cold on the tray, and that this was, perhaps, a thing she could mend. She said, into the quiet, "My name is Ivy. I do not mind if you do not want to say yours. I have brought a milk pudding. It is warm. I am going to eat a spoon of mine, because the cook made it and it would be a shame to waste it, and I will leave yours where you can reach it, and I will sit here until it is cold, and then I will take mine away, and yours too if you have not touched it. And no one will be cross with you. That is the arrangement." She reached for the tray. She took 1 bowl. She took 1 spoon. She ate a spoonful of the milk pudding, which was very good, sweet with nutmeg, and she said, "It is very good," and she meant it, and she set the bowl on her knee. The boy stopped rocking. He did not look up. He put 1 hand out, palm flat. in the exact space between them on the rug. He did not reach for the bowl. He put his hand out, and he waited. Ivy understood without being told. She put the second bowl into the space between them, and the second spoon beside it, handle turned toward his hand, and she moved her own knees back an inch to make more room. She did not speak. The boy picked up the spoon. He picked it up with the whole of his fist, the way a very small child does, though he was old enough to know better, and Ivy did not correct him. He ate a spoonful. He ate a second. He put the spoon down between mouthfuls, exactly parallel to the bowl, and picked it up again. Everything he did in a careful order, and when he had eaten 5 spoonfuls, he set the spoon down parallel to the bowl and did not eat any more, and the count did not begin again. At the window the girl said, 17. Ivy said, I heard you. 17 is still a prime. It has not stopped being 1. The girl slid down from the window seat. She walked, very carefully, along an invisible line down the middle of the rug, 1 foot exactly in front of the other. She sat down not beside Ivy and not beside her brother, but at the third point of a triangle, so that the 3 of them made a shape. She looked at the tray. She looked at Ivy. She said, Is there mine? I did not know there would be a you, Ivy said. I brought 2, because I was told 2. I will eat quickly. You may have mine. She held her bowl out. The girl took it with both hands. She did not thank her. She ate 3 spoonfuls with the same careful order the boy had used, and then she set the bowl down parallel to his, and she said, without looking at Ivy, You did not knock loud. I knocked once, Ivy said. I did not want to knock loud. Loud is worse than quiet, in a small room. Yes, said the girl, it is. Loud is worse. The man in the doorway, whom Ivy could not see and did not know was there, closed his eyes for a moment and opened them again. He turned away from the door. He went down the passage on soft feet. He did not go to his own rooms. He went down the back stairs and through the pantry passage and into the housekeeper's parlour, where Mrs. Halloran was seated at her small desk with the list she had had in her hand an hour before, and he shut the door behind him and stood with his back to it. Halloran, he said. Who is the new one? Mrs. Halloran stood. She did not curtsy. She had known him since he was a boy of 9 visiting his uncle, and she did not curtsy to boys who had climbed her pear tree. Wren, sir, she said. Ivy Wren. 3 weeks. She came out of the vicarage school at Little Denton, kept house for the vicar's aunt 6 years. Aunt died. Vicar's new wife did not want her. We took her. She is quiet. She works. She does not gossip. She sat on the floor, he said. Mrs. Halloran was silent a moment. Then she said, in the flat voice of a woman who has decided to answer a thing plainly, No one else has, sir. Not since your brother died. Not before, if I am honest. Miss Cordelia said the boy is an animal, and the girl is a fool. Miss Cordelia said it in front of them. That was the last day they came down to dinner. The Duke, whose name was Adrian Marchwood, and who had not slept a full night since a letter had reached him in Northumberland, telling him his brother had drowned in a river he had crossed 100 times, said very quietly, They are not. No, sir, said Mrs. Halloran. They are not. He said, Do not tell her who I am. Not yet. Sir, said Mrs. Halloran, I have watched trays go up for 6 days, he said. I did not know what to do. I am not sure I know now. But I would like to see what she does when she does not know I am watching. That is the only thing I can trust. Mrs. Halloran folded her hands. She said, She will not do anything different, sir. That is the difficulty with her. Then let me have the difficulty, he said, and went out. Upstairs on the nursery rug the fire had been lit. Ivy had knelt at the grate and struck the flint and coaxed the kindling with the patience of a woman who had lit a great many fires in cold rooms, and the boy had watched her hands, only her hands, and had not rocked. The girl had gone back to the window, but she had turned the window seat so that she sat sideways, so that Ivy was in the corner of her eye. And Ivy understood that this was the arrangement now, and she was not to lose it by any sudden movement. She stayed until the milk pudding bowls were empty, and the fire was steady. She stacked the tray. She stood up slowly. She said, "I will come tomorrow if you would like. I will bring what the cook makes. If you would rather I did not come, you may leave the door shut, and I will leave the tray on the landing, and I will not mind. That is also the arrangement." The girl said, without turning, "What is your count?" "My count," said Ivy. "Your count," said the girl. "Everyone has one. His is 12, mine is 17. What is yours?" Ivy thought. She said, "I have not counted mine. I will count tonight and tell you tomorrow. Is that fair?" "Yes," said the girl. "That is fair." Ivy carried the tray to the door. She turned in the doorway and looked back once, because it seemed rude not to, and she said good night. Neither child answered. The boy was watching the fire. The girl was watching the rain. But the boy's hand, palm flat, was resting on the rug in the space where her knee had been, as if he were keeping the place warm for her, and Ivy saw it, and she did not speak of it, and she shut the door softly and went down. On the landing she stopped. She had thought she was alone. She was not. A tall man was standing at the far end of the passage, his back to a window, his face in shadow. She could not see his coat clearly. She could see that he was very still. She dropped her eyes at once, because a housemaid did not stare at a gentleman in a private passage, and she said, "I beg your pardon, sir," and made to pass with the tray. He said, "Is that for the cook to see?" "Yes, sir," she said. She had not lifted her eyes. He said, "Was any of it eaten?" Something in the way he asked it, careful, as though the answer mattered more than he wished to show, made her look up after all. He was not old. He was perhaps 32. He had a long grave face, and a broken line at the bridge of the nose and eyes that were the colour of the rain on the slates outside, and he did not look like a man who was accustomed to asking a housemaid anything. She thought he might be a steward, or a physician the housekeeper had called in, or a cousin come down for the morning. She did not think Duke. Dukes did not stand in back passages in plain coats. "Both bowls, sir," she said. "And the milk. They ate it themselves. I did not feed them. I only sat." He was silent. He said at last, "Thank you." "You need not thank me, sir," she said. "I did nothing. I sat on a rug. Anyone could have done it." He said no, they could not. She did not know how to answer that, so she did not answer it. She dipped her head and went past him with the tray. She felt his eyes on her back until she reached the turning of the stair, and then she did not. In the kitchen, Mrs. Halloran took the tray from her without a word and looked at the empty bowls and looked at Ivy over her spectacles, and said only, "Sit down, eat your supper, do not tell the others." Ivy sat. She ate. She did not tell the others. She counted her breath, walking back to her attic room by candlelight, and by the time she reached the top step she had her number. 9. Her count was 9. She was not sure why. She thought it was because she had been 9 when her mother had died, and 9 breaths was about how long she could hold a thing in her chest before she had to let it out. She would tell the girl in the morning, if the girl asked. She thought the girl would ask. The girl was a person who kept an arrangement. She slept without dreams. She rose before the bell. She went down and helped with the fires and the water and the porridge, and at 10, when Mrs. Halloran nodded to her without a word, she took the small tray up. Milk pudding again. A boiled egg cut in halves. A slice of bread with the crusts left on, because she had not been told to cut them off and she suspected the crusts were the point. She knocked once. The door opened before her hand fell. The girl was on the other side of it. The girl said, 9, 9, Ivy said. That is right. How did you know? I did not, said the girl. I asked. You said you would tell me. You have. Come in. He is on the rug. Ivy went in. For the next 4 mornings she went in. She sat on the rug. She did not touch either child. She did not attempt to teach them anything, or dress them differently, or tie back the boy's fair hair, though she thought about it. She learned that the boy was called Julian, and the girl was called Beatrice, and she learned it from the girl, who said it once, plainly, and did not repeat. She learned that Julian did not like the sound of cutlery scraped on porcelain, and that if you served his milk pudding in a wooden bowl he would eat all of it. She asked the cook for a wooden bowl. The cook, who had been at Ashgrove 40 years, and whose eyes were suddenly wet, gave her 2. She learned that Beatrice knew the names of every bird that came to the nursery window, and had made a list of them in a book she kept under the seat, and that the list had 147 entries, and that Beatrice would show the book to a person if that person did not touch it, and did not ask a question about it, and did not turn the pages. She learned that the household had begun, quietly, to notice her. Housemaids stepped aside for her on the stair now, with something in their eyes that was not quite respect and not quite envy, but was close to both. The footman who carried the coal to the nursery, who had refused for a year to knock, now knocked. The cook set aside the crusts. Mrs. Halloran said nothing at all, which from Mrs. Halloran was the highest praise a household could give. She learned, also, that the tall grave man in the plain coat was very often in the house, and was not a steward, because a steward did not go into the library alone and stay there half a day, and was not a physician, because a physician did not stand in the stable yard at dusk and put his hand very carefully on the neck of a horse that had not been ridden since its master had died. She did not ask who he was. It was not her business. Twice more she had passed him on a stair or in a passage. Twice more he had asked, was any of it eaten? Twice more she had answered plainly, and twice more he had said, "Thank you," and stepped aside. On the 5th morning Mrs. Halloran caught her at the kitchen door. "Wren," she said, "the mistress arrives today. Miss Cordelia Marchwood. She is the late Duke's cousin. She has been at Bath. She has kept the house in the north for the family. She will be here by 3. Keep out of her way." "Yes, ma'am," Ivy said. "She is not kind," said Mrs. Halloran, without looking at her. "Not to housemaids, not to children, not to anyone she thinks cannot answer her back." "Do you understand me, Wren?" "Yes, ma'am," said Ivy. "I understand. Miss Cordelia arrived at 3:30 in a carriage with 4 horses and a great deal of luggage, and a very small dog that she carried under one arm and did not set down. She was a handsome woman of about 28, with dark hair and a mouth that had been trained to smile at exactly the width she wished. She swept through the hall as if she had built it. She kissed Mrs. Halloran on the cheek and did not see her. She said, "Where are those children? Have they been washed? Have they been made presentable? Adrian will be here within the week, and I will not have him find them like beasts in a stall." "Mrs. Halloran said, 'They are in the nursery, madam.'" Miss Cordelia went up. Ivy, coming down the back stairs with a basket of clean linen. heard the door of the nursery open, and heard Miss Cordelia's voice go into the room like a knife into a loaf. She did not mean to stop on the landing. She stopped. "Get up," said Miss Cordelia. "Get up off the floor, both of you. What are you? What are you? Bee, look at me when I speak. Bee, Julian, stop that. Stop that at once. Do you hear me? What creature does that? What creature?" There was a sound. It was not weeping. It was a small, patient, repeating sound. Quickened, Ivy set the basket down on the landing. She did not think. She moved. She walked into the nursery. She walked past Miss Cordelia, as if Miss Cordelia were a piece of furniture she did not wish to knock. And she went to the rug, and she sat down cross-legged in the space between the twins, and she said, "Into the room, not to Miss Cordelia 12. That is Julian's count. It is a very good count. It is not a thing a creature does. It is a thing a boy does when he is being brave in a loud room." Miss Cordelia turned on her. "Who are you?" she said. "Who are you to speak in this house?" "I am Ivy Wren, ma'am," said Ivy. "I am the housemaid. I have been sitting with the children. If you will speak more softly, they will hear you better. Loud is worse than quiet in a small room. Beatrice told me so, and she is right. She did not raise her eyes. She kept them on the rug, because she knew that if she raised them to Miss Cordelia's face, she would show what was in her own, and what was in her own would cost her her place. She counted. 9, she let it out. Miss Cordelia said, in a voice like a bell struck 3 times to summon a servant, "You will go down. You will go down at once. You will pack your box. You have laid hands on your betters. You have spoken to me. You will be gone by dark, and you will have no character from this house. Do you hear me, girl? I have not laid a hand on you, ma'am," Ivy said. "I have sat on a rug. If I am to be dismissed, I will go. But I will finish this half-hour first, because I was engaged for it, and because the boy's count is not yet steady, and I do not leave a thing half done." She heard behind her in the corridor a footstep. She did not turn. Miss Cordelia's face changed. It changed in the way a face changes when it has just seen the person it most wishes to please walk into the room, and Ivy understood, without looking, that the tall, grave man in the plain coat had come to the door. He said from the doorway, "Cordelia, come out into the passage." "Adrian," said Miss Cordelia, and her voice climbed a note. "Adrian, this girl, do you see?" She sat down. She spoke to me. "She come out," he said. Now Miss Cordelia went. The door closed. Ivy did not know what was said in the passage, and she did not try to hear. She sat on the rug. She counted with Julian 10, 11, 12, 13, and she watched his rocking slow, and she said, very quietly, "You were very brave. That was a loud room. You held your count. That was well done." Beatrice came down from the window. She sat at the 3rd point of the triangle. She said, without any weight at all, "You called him Julian." "I did," Ivy said. "I hope that was allowed." "Yes," said Beatrice. "It was allowed. He heard it. He heard you say it was a boy's count. He will remember that. He remembers what people say about him. He remembers all of it." "I know," said Ivy. "That is why I said it." She did not know then that Adrian Marchwood was standing on the other side of the closed nursery door, one hand flat on the wood, listening, and that his cousin had left him 5 minutes before, in a fury of skirts, and that he had told her plainly in 6 sentences that she would leave the house tonight in the carriage she had come in, and would keep the house in the north on a small allowance, and would not, upon any pretext, ever again cross the threshold of Ashgrove while he lived, and that if she wrote to him, he would burn the letter unread. She did not know then that he had said it without raising his voice, and that she had not answered, because there was nothing to answer with. She only knew that the tray was empty, and that Julian's count had gone from 12 to 9, and that Beatrice had opened the bird book on her own knee, without being asked, and turned it so that Ivy could see the page, and that on the page was a rook drawn in a child's hand, with the word rook written under it in careful capitals, and beneath the word, in smaller careful capitals. Ivy said they are clever. She thought I did not. I said mares. I said mares were clever. She was listening to something else. She has kept it. She did not say so. She looked at the rook, and she said, that is a very good rook. He has the right shoulders. Rooks stand square. You have seen that. Yes, said Beatrice, I have seen it. The days that followed were quieter than the days before. Miss Cordelia was gone. The house did not speak of her. A trunk was sent after her to Bath. A letter came from Bath. It was, Ivy heard by accident from the pantry maid, burned unread at the library grate. Mrs. Halloran wore, for one afternoon, the ghost of a smile. The cook made a plum tart and sent up 2 slices in wooden bowls. The tall grave man in the plain coat did not vanish. He was there in the mornings on the terrace, walking slowly, hands behind his back. He was there in the stable yard at dusk, still with his hand on the neck of the horse that had not been ridden. He was there once at the schoolroom door, watching Ivy try to interest Julian in the letter B by drawing it in flour on the nursery table, because Beatrice had said, quite plainly, he learns with his fingers, not his eyes, and Ivy had believed her. He did not come in. He watched. When she looked up, he was gone. On the 10th morning, Mrs. Halloran said, Wren, His Grace wishes to see you in the library at 11. Wear your clean apron. Do not be afraid. He is not going to dismiss you. His Grace, said Ivy. Mrs. Halloran looked at her over her spectacles a long moment, the way a person looks at a child who has been told a story 3 times and has still to work out the end. His Grace the Duke of Ashgrove, she said. Adrian Marchwood, the new master, the children's uncle. The gentleman in the plain coat, Wren, Ivy sat down. She was not aware of sitting down until she was on the kitchen chair. She put her hands very carefully on her knees. She said, Oh, yes, said Mrs. Halloran. Oh, 11, mind, do not be late. At 11 Ivy stood in the library. The library smelled of leather and old paper, and the coal in the grate. And there was a bowl of hyacinths on the desk that had been brought in from the glasshouse, and that filled the whole room with a green, wet sweetness she would remember as long as she lived. Adrian Marchwood stood at the window with his back to her, and when he turned he was in a black coat cut to his shoulders and a white cravat tied plainly, and he was still the man from the passage, only he was also the Duke now, and Ivy saw that the 2 men were the same man, and had always been. She dropped a small curtsy. She did not lift her eyes. He said, Sit down, Miss Wren. I would rather stand, Your Grace, she said, if it is all the same to you. It is not all the same to me, he said, but as you wish. He came and stood by the desk. He did not sit either. He said, I owe you an honesty. I have been in this house 11 days. I did not send word. I wore a plain coat, and I stood in a doorway, and I watched a great many trays go up and come down. I let the household believe I had not yet arrived. I did that because I did not know these children, and I did not know this house, and I did not trust my own judgment of either. I wanted to see who was in it, who could be trusted, who could not. Yes, Your Grace, said Ivy. I saw you sit on the floor, he said. On the first evening, I saw you sit on the floor and eat a spoon of your own pudding and give the second bowl over. I saw the boy put his hand out. I have watched a great many well, meaning people fail to put a hand out to him. You did not know I was watching. You did not know who I was. You would have done it the same if I had never come to Ashgrove. That is why I am telling you now. I would have done it for anyone, Your Grace, said Ivy. It was not a great thing. It was, he said. But I will not argue with you. I have another honesty. My cousin dismissed you in this house. I overruled her. I would have overruled her if you had been the worst servant in England. She had no right to speak so in front of those children. She has none of my authority now, and she will have none in future. That is not for you to thank me for. It is what should have been done a year ago, and was not. I do not thank you, Your Grace, said Ivy. It was not for me. He looked at her a long moment. He said, No, I am beginning to see it was not. He said, I have kept you standing. Forgive me. Sit down, Miss Wren. She sat, this time, because her knees had made the decision for her. He said, I would like to ask you a thing, and I would like you to answer plainly, and I would like you to know that whatever you answer will not lose you your place, or the children, or a shilling. Do you understand me? Yes, Your Grace, said Ivy. I would like you to be their governess, he said. Not their nurse, not their maid, their governess. On a proper salary. In a proper room. With the schoolroom yours to arrange as you like, and Mrs. Halloran, and the cook, and the stable, and the glass-house at your word, for anything you think they need. I have written to 2 physicians in London who have studied children like Julian and Beatrice. I would like you to read the letters they send, and tell me what you think of them. I would like you to say no, if no is what you think. I would like you to say what should be done. I will listen. I am not asking you to be a wife or a sister or a mother to them. I am asking you to be what you have been for 10 days, and to be paid for it, and to be respected in this house for it. Ivy did not answer for a long moment. In the grate a coal shifted. On the desk the hyacinths breathed. Outside the window a rook called once, and settled. She said, I do not know letters well enough to read a London physician, Your Grace. I will read them with you, he said. That is not a difficulty. She said, I am not a lady. Miss Cordelia would say I am not fit to teach them. Miss Cordelia is at Bath, he said, and will remain there. You have taught Julian the letter B in flower. You have taught Beatrice that a person will keep an arrangement. Those are the 2 lessons that mattered. The rest is books. Books I have. She said, at last, plainly, Yes, Your Grace, I will. Thank you, he said. And then, because he was the sort of man who kept account of what was owed, he said thank you. You need not thank me twice, Your Grace, she said. I have thanked you for 2 different things, he said. It is not the same thing twice. She almost smiled. She did not, quite, because she had trained herself not to smile where it showed, but the corner of her mouth moved, and he saw it, and he did not remark on it, and she was grateful for that also. She rose to go. At the door she stopped. She said, without turning, Your Grace. May I ask a thing? Anything, he said. The gentleman in the plain coat, she said. He asked me 3 times, was any of it eaten? Why did he ask? Because it was the only thing I could think to ask, he said. I did not know what else there was to want to know. She thought about that. She said, that was the right question. Good day, Your Grace. Good day, Miss Wren, he said. She went out. She closed the door softly, because loud was worse than quiet in a small room, and the library was not a small room, but the habit had begun to be hers. The winter passed. The schoolroom was made over. A low table was put in it, and 2 chairs of the right height. Wooden bowls arrived from a workshop in the village. A window seat was widened for Beatrice with a hinged lid, and under the lid Beatrice put her bird book, and the list of birds passed 200, and then 3. Julian learned to write his name. He wrote it always in the same corner of the paper, in careful capitals, and he wrote it in flour on the table when he did not have paper, and Ivy did not correct the flour. She swept it up in the evenings, and thought that some things were worth a swept floor. The physician's letters came. Ivy read them in the library with Adrian at her elbow, a finger under the words she did not know. One of the letters was kind. One was foolish. She said so plainly. He wrote back to the kind one, and did not answer the foolish one, and a small round man came from London in the spring, and spent 3 days at Ashgrove, and said at the end of it, quietly, in the library, "They are exactly the children God made them, Your Grace. They will not be other children. They are good children. The girl who sits on the floor with them is doing more than any London physician will. Pay her well." "I intend to," said Adrian. He did. He paid her more than a governess, and less than a companion, and he had a small parlour made over on the nursery floor for her private use. And he asked the housekeeper plainly whether the household understood the arrangement, and the housekeeper said, plainly, "Yes, sir, they do, and they approve, and if anyone had objected I would have told you, and I have not." The spring came in. The rain gave up. The hyacinths in the library died, and the tulips came. Ivy walked, in the afternoons, with the twins in the walled garden. Julian would not walk on the gravel, because the sound of gravel underfoot hurt him. They walked on the grass verge. Beatrice named the birds. Adrian, who was often in the garden at that hour because the schoolroom had proved to be near the library window, walked at Ivy's other side, hands behind his back, and said very little, and asked, sometimes, was any of it eaten, meaning the day, and she would answer yes, Your Grace, all of it, and he would nod. One evening in May, when the light was long and the swallows were low over the lawn, he stopped on the path and said, Miss Wren. Your Grace, she said. He said, I have a thing to say to you, and I would like to say it plainly, because that is how you speak, and I have learned from you. She stood very still. She did not look up. He said, I have loved you since the 3rd evening, when I stood at the doorway, and you counted with Julian in a voice like a woman quieting a horse. I did not know it was love then. I know it now. I am not asking you to answer me tonight. I am not asking you to answer me in a month. I will ask you again when you have had all the summer to think, and your no will be as safe with me as your yes. And nothing in this house will alter by a shilling or a chair whether you say one or the other. If you say no, I will not ask a second time. If you say yes, I will believe you meant it, because you do not say what you do not mean. Do you understand me? She was silent a long moment. A rook called once from the elm above the wall. Beatrice, on the grass, was counting swallows aloud, in the flat voice she used for counting, and had reached 17. Ivy said, Your Grace. Adrian, he said. If you please. When we are alone. My name, if you please, is one you have not used yet. Adrian, she said. She said it as if she were setting a cup down very carefully, on a shelf she was not sure was level. Then she said, I do not need the summer. He did not move. He said, Be sure. I am sure, she said. I have known since the morning I sat in the library and you asked the right question. I did not know it was love then. I know it now. He said then, and could not for a moment say anything else. She said plainly, I have conditions. Name them, he said. "You will not lie to me again," she said. "Not in a plain coat, not in a passage, not for a good reason. If you must watch me to know a thing, you will tell me you are watching. That is the first." "I will not lie to you again," he said. "I swear it." "You will not send the children away," she said. "Not to a school, not to a physician, not to a house in the north. They stay where their count is steady. That is the second. They stay," he said. "They are mine. They are ours, if you will have it so." "I will have it so," she said. "That is the third. They are ours, not mine to teach, and yours to keep." "Ours, ours," he said. He did not seize her. He did not speak. He only waited. She lifted her hand slowly and set it in his, palm up, and he took it, and he drew off her glove finger by finger, and set the glove on the low wall of the walled garden, and turned her bare hand over and kissed the back of it once, and did not let go. Her fingers laced through his. They were red at the knuckles and steady at the fingers. His were long and hard and warm. On the grass Beatrice, without turning, said, 20 swallows." "That is more than yesterday. That is a good count," said Ivy. "That is a very good count." They were married in the parish church at Ashgrove on a morning in June, with the west door open on the roses, and the twins on the front pew in wooden chairs Adrian had made for them because the pews were the wrong height. And the housekeeper wept once into a handkerchief and did not weep again. The wedding was a duke's wedding, which is to say the church was full, and the bells were rung, and the tenants came. But the vows were said plainly, in 10 sentences between them, and there was no fuss beyond what the day required. A year later, on a winter evening much like the one Ivy had first climbed the back stairs with a tray, the 4 of them sat in the small parlour that had been made over on the nursery floor. The fire was steady. Rain fell on the slates outside. Julian sat on the rug at Ivy's feet with a wooden bowl of milk pudding, eating in careful order, the spoon set parallel to the bowl between mouthfuls. Beatrice sat at the window with her bird book open on her knee. The list had passed 400. Miss Cordelia had, so Mrs. Halloran had heard from a cousin at Bath, married a widower with a small pension and a large dog, and lived in 3 rooms, and had not written again. The letter she had sent the year before had been burned unread in the library grate. And no second letter had come, and none was expected. Adrian sat in the chair opposite Ivy, with a book on his knee he was not reading. The bridge on the North Road, which had been near to falling in the wet a year and a half before, had been mended in the summer, quietly, by a mason whose name had not been given to the village, and whose bill Ivy had not been shown until she had asked. The rent on the schoolmistress's cottage in Little Denton had been paid, quietly, for a year, by a hand that had asked not to be named. The schoolmistress was Ivy's old vicar's aunt's neighbour, and Ivy had learned of it from Mrs. Halloran, who had learned of it from the cook, who had learned of it because she had recognised the handwriting on the note that came with the boots for the schoolmistress's brother, who had none. There were 4 such notes that Ivy knew of. She suspected 6. She did not ask. She knew the hand. Beatrice said, without turning, from the window, 17. 17, Ivy said. 17 is still a prime. Yes, said Beatrice. It has not stopped being 1. Julian set the spoon down parallel to the bowl. He put his hand out, palm flat, in the space between Ivy's foot and the rug, and left it there. Ivy set her own hand over his, without looking down, without ceremony, and he did not move it away. Adrian looked across at her over the top of the book he was not reading, and reached his hand out to hers across the space between the chairs, and she gave him her bare hand, and their fingers laced, and they did not let go. Outside a rook called once from the elm and settled. The rain fell on the slates. The bridge on the North Road held. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so the next one finds you when it is ready, and tell me in the comments, what would you have said in the doorway of that nursery on the first evening, when you heard a small patient count behind the closed door and you had been told not to go in? I would like to know. There will be another story soon. Another quiet house. Another kindness that no one thought was being seen. I will keep them for you. Until then, be gentle with the ones who cannot answer you back. It is the only test that tells the truth.